Hello, I'm Russ Lowenthal, Product Manager for Database Security here at Oracle, and today I'd like to walk you through 4 simple things that you should do to protect your data and secure your database. First, it's important to assess your database's configuration to find places where your settings introduce additional risk into the environment. Next, you want to encrypt your data at rest and in motion to protect data as it transits over the networks and as it resides on your storage arrays. Then you want to control access to your database, ensuring that your database users have only the privileges needed to do their jobs. And finally, you need to have a record of what those users do once they're logged into the database, so you should audit your database activity. Let's start with assessment. The database has dozens of settings and profile parameters that impact security. It's important to control your configuration so that you don't have settings that expose the database to additional risk. There are 2 items in your tool bag that will help you scan the database for configuration issues and make suggestions on how to fix those issues. One of them is the Database Security Assessment tool. This is available for all customers. You can download it from my Oracle support. Another is Oracle DataSafe. DataSafe is a cloud service that is included with all Oracle database services running in our cloud. It's also available for on-premises. Let's take a look at using these tools to assess risk. We'll start with the Database Security Assessment tool, which we download from my Oracle support. Just look for note 213825 4.1. Once you see the note, you'll scroll down and you will find the place where you can agree to the terms and conditions and download the tool. After you have the assessment tool downloaded, it's just a zip file, you're going to go ahead and copy it to your database server. When you get the file copied to the database server, there's no install. All you have to do is unzip the utility. That takes just a few seconds. And then you want to make sure that you meet the prerequisites to run the Database Security Assessment tool. You'll need to have Python version 2.6 or higher. I prefer version 3. You'll need to have zip, of course, to unzip the utility. And you'll need Java 1.8 or higher. Let's just check. Make sure we have Python, and sure enough, we do. Then we'll run the Database Security Assessment tool collector module. The collector module connects into the database and scans all of the parameters and configuration settings to make sure that you don't have any that introduce additional risk. We'll connect as a DBA. I'm going to use my own account. I'm Russ, and I have DBA privileges in this database. And I'm going to send the collector output to a file called dbsat-dbworld. We connect into the database, we run it, and then we're going to produce the output as an encrypted file. So we give it a password to encrypt the file. Next, we're going to run the reporter module. Here, what we do is we just run report and we give it as an input the name of the file we created from the collector. We don't have to log into the database. We do have to give it the password we used when we created this file. And again, we give it the password to encrypt the output reports, which, as you'll see, are in 4 different formats. HTML for reading, JSON for interfacing with other systems, a spreadsheet format for keeping track of what you fix and don't fix, and then just text because it's easy to do. Now let's take a look at what one of those reports are. We've got several different things to find here. We can see what features we're using. We can see we're up to date on patching as of the time I ran this. And we can see, sure enough, well, here's a finding. It's a low risk finding, but we have some user accounts that don't have inactive timeout set. That means that even if these users don't log in for 3 years, they can still log in and their accounts remain active. You may want to fix this to reduce a little bit of risk. I think if we look, though, we can find something that's a little bit more severe. I remember seeing 1 medium risk or 2 medium risk. Oh, here's a medium risk. We found 10 users in the database. Look at that, one of them is me, who don't have a password complexity function assigned to them. That means that these users could potentially have very weak passwords. And so the recommendation is to assign a password complexity function. Now, remember I said that there were optional tools. One of the optional tools is Oracle DataSafe. Let's take a look at how DataSafe can do this same type of thing for us. We'll log into our Cloud Console, we'll go to the DataSafe Security Center, and we'll click on Security Assessment. DataSafe automatically runs the security assessment on a periodic basis. You get to control the schedule for this. You can run daily, weekly, monthly. I run them every week. We'll take a look at our report, and we'll see in the report the same findings. We've got, let me find that medium risk. It'll take just a second for the report to come up. There's my medium risk, and just like we saw in the DBSAT report, we can see we've got some users who are not using a password verification function. All right, let's see. Now, in addition to security assessment, DataSafe also has a user assessment module that lets me look at the users inside of a database and assess those users to determine how much risk would they present if their accounts were compromised. And the idea is you can see the users, you can see who has DBA rights, who has database fault admin. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But you can see what privileges they have, and you can use this information to try and find places where you can remove privileges to reduce the risk if the accounts are compromised. We show you both direct privilege grants, and we also give you role grants, and we let you parse down through those. Let's go ahead and take a look at encrypting our data. For data in motion over the network, we have a choice between Oracle Native Network Encryption, which is certificateless, and Transport Layer Security that requires the database server be issued a certificate. For data at rest, we'll use Transparent Data Encryption to protect table spaces that contain sensitive data. Let's take a look at what it takes to encrypt a table space, and we'll start with a clean slate. There are no data table spaces created yet in this database. I'm going to go ahead and create two table spaces, one without encryption, I'll call that one test clear, and the other with encryption, I'll call that one test encrypt. We can see our two table spaces were created, and if we look in them, we see that there's no data in them. It's just the table space headers. Okay. Let's go ahead and create tables. One table called Test Clear in the Test Clear table space, one table called Test Encrypt in the Test Encrypt table space. And we'll go ahead and insert some data into those table spaces. Now let's go look at them. I didn't commit my transactions, so when we check for data in these, we shouldn't see anything, but I'm just going to look for the string Russ in these, and I don't find it. Let's go ahead and commit our transaction, and we'll force a checkpoint to write the data down to disk. Let's go back out and look again, and this time when we look for Russ, we find Test Clear, Russ was here. But notice we don't find Test Encrypt. That's odd. Let's look at that clear table space again. So we'll do a strings on our clear table space. And sure enough, we can clearly see that the data's there. Let's look at the encrypt table space. Well, the data's there too. It's just not visible because it's encrypted. This is the power of encryption. Now let's look at access control. At a high level, the goal is really simple. Users should have the minimum level of privileges necessary to do their business function. Every privilege we grant to a user that they don't need unnecessarily increases the risk if that user's account is compromised. In practice, this is the area of database security with the most complexity, and that complexity is reflected in the number of tools that we have to work with. It can be from basic privilege and role grants through privilege user access control with database vault, and even on to fine-grained control at the row and column level. There are a lot of ways to control access in the Oracle database. Now, in our tool bag, I also lump tools for reporting capabilities, things like privilege analysis that tells you what privileges users are using, or DBSAT and DataSafe, which tell you what privileges users have. All of these are part of privilege access control to a certain degree. Because compromised accounts are the most common ways that databases get breached, Controlling privileged user access to data is a really popular way to mitigate risk. From our tool bag, we're going to use Database Vault to remove administrator access to data. We'll start with a system that isn't using Database Vault. Notice that Database Vault is neither configured nor enabled. Before we can configure Database Vault, we have to create two users. We'll create a user called DV Owner. This is going to be the person who can create Database Vault policies and change policies. And we'll create a user called DV Manager. DV Manager is the person who will be able to create users, grant them the ability to connect to the database and change their passwords, but that's all. Now that we've created our users, let's go ahead and get logged in as DV Owner. We'll need to do something as that user in just a minute. But first, we'll configure Database Vault. Now, what we're doing now is we are saying we want to configure Database Vault and that the owner is the user we just created, DV Owner, and the account manager, the person who will have that role, will be the DV Manager. This takes just a second to run, and now we'll connect as the Database Vault owner. So we switch our session over to there, and we enable Database Vault. Now, before this takes effect, we have to restart. So let's log in to the database, and before we restart, let's just make sure we don't have any invalid procedures. So we'll go into our container, and once we're in our container, we'll run util-rp. Again, takes just a few seconds to run. No invalid objects, we're fine. So let's go ahead and shut the container down. So we alter the pluggable database close. Again, takes just a second to close. And then we'll open the database for use again. And as soon as it comes up, all right, we now have Database Vault both enabled and configured. Before we can test that, we have to re-log in because we shut the database down. So give me just a second here to get re-logged in. I'll log in as the Database Vault owner. I'll log in as my account, Russ, who has DBA privileges, and I'll log in as sys. All right, let's go in as sys and check our status. And like I said, we can now see Database Vault is both configured and enabled. It's not enforcing anything yet. It's just configured and enabled. It is enforcing separation of duties. That's by default. So right now, I can still see sensitive data as sys. If I go in as a DBA, I can still see sensitive data. And if I go in, well, let's fix it so we can't see this data anymore. To do this, I'm going to create a Database Vault realm. The Database Vault realm is just a collection of objects that we can enforce policies on. So this is a necessary step. I create my Database Vault realm, and then here's where the fun stuff starts to happen. I'm going to go ahead and add objects to this realm. Now, the objects I'm going to add is everything in the employee search prod schema. Yes, I can control privileges at the schema level. If I add a new table, it doesn't matter. They're all protected the same way by this realm. So we'll go ahead and protect the realm. And then the final thing we want to do is we want applications to continue to work. So we are going to add a user to the realm, and the user we're going to add in, the grantee, is employee search prod, the schema owner. So with this done, employee search prod should be able to see data. Nobody else should be able to see data because we haven't added them to the realm. Let's test this. We'll go ahead and let me get logged in as employee search prod. And let's check, and we can see our data. So that's working as it should. Let's try logging in as a DBA. Can I see data? No, I can't, because I'm not a member of the security realm. Let's try a sys. Can I see data? No, I can't, because I'm not a member of the Database Vault realm. And yes, I really am in as sys. So we've used Database Vault to protect our data from compromised privileged users like DBAs. This is one of the most important things you can do to help secure your database. All right, we've seen the power of Database Vault. Let's move on. This time, we're going to take a look at auditing, and this is our fourth step. We want to collect information on security-relevant actions, things like failed logins or privilege grants, changes to database structures, and in our tool bag, our biggest tool is Unified Audit, which allows us to instruct the database on what activity we want to record. We have a couple of optional tools, Audit Vault and Database Firewall, or DataSafe, which can be used to gather the audit data from the database for analysis and alerting and reporting. But the key thing is unified auditing. So let's take a look at how that works. And as always, we will start with a system that has no auditing enabled. I have purged my audit trail. Notice the only record that's in there is the record of the actual purge action. And I have disabled, just check, I have disabled all of my audit policies. So there is nothing being audited right now. Now, before I can enable an audit policy, I have to be logged in as a user who has the Audit Vault admin, the audit admin role. And we can see that, yes, I'm logged in as AV admin, and I do have the audit admin role. This allows me to create audit policies, enable and disable audit policies. I'm just going to use some of the predefined policies that come with the database. I don't have to do anything custom here. So I'm going to enable 3 policies. I want to audit logins to the database if they're not successful. I want to audit any changes to database vault policies. And I'm going to enable the standard secure config audit policy, which looks for things like when someone creates a user or drops a user or changes a stored procedure or things like that. All right. We check our enabled policies, and now we can see that sure enough, those 3 policies are enabled. All right, let's go ahead and do some things to generate activity. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try this as sys. I'm going to create a user Bob in the database. Now, remember that right before this, I enabled Database Vault. And in a Database Vault environment, sys can't create a user. That's against separation of duties. Only someone with the account manager role can create a user. So let's go try and create Bob as the Database Vault manager. Let's see, I don't think I'm logged in. Okay, yeah, I'm not logged in as DV manager, so we'll connect as DV manager. And let's go ahead and create Bob. This time it should be successful. And sure enough, it is successful. Let's grant create session to Bob. Done. Let's go ahead and grant him DBA while we're at it. Oh, wait, here's Database Vault again. In our separation of duties model, the Database Vault manager, the person who manages accounts and users, can't grant DBA privileges. That has to be done by somebody with those privileges. The DV manager doesn't have that. So let's go ahead and do the grant as sys, because sys can grant DBA. And sure enough, we're in there, our grant succeeded. All right, let's see what audit records were generated as a result of this activity. We've got 4 additional audit records that were generated. If we scroll over, we can see there should be one for creating user Bob. And there it is. We've got a create user Bob. And then as the AV admin, I enabled 3 audit policies, and changing audit configuration is always audited. So we see the records that we should see here. And we can see what was done, what SQL statement was done. Notice we didn't record the password. Now let's try a couple of failed logins. First, I'll try logging in as Bob. But I didn't make Bob's password Bob. Bob had a stronger password, so this will fail. Let's try logging in as a user who doesn't even exist in the database. There's no user called Joe in this database. Let's see if we can log in. We can't. Of course not, because the user doesn't exist. Let's go look at our audit trail. When we look at our audit trail, again, we can see there's a couple of new records. And notice that the host that these came from is different, because the first I did from SQL Developer on my laptop. The last couple I did from an SSH session logged into a Linux server where I connected via SQL+. All right. So here what you get is the power of auditing. You're able to see who has done what inside of your database. Let's move on to one of those optional tools. We're going to look at DataSafe now. And DataSafe has been collecting our audit information all along. So we'll go into Activity Auditing in DataSafe. And we'll select our database, and we can see, sure enough, there's our audit records, and we'll filter by user entitlements. And when we filter by user entitlements, let's just go up and do that. Give it a second, and sure enough, there's our creation of Bob, and we can expand this out, and we can see Bob was created, logged in as the DV Manager user from Russ's laptop running SQL Developer, and we see the time that it was done. You get all of the information to know who has done what inside of your database. Audit tools like DataSafe make analyzing the audit data easier. They also allow you to do things like create alerts for important activity. All right, now from here, we're done. We've done 4 things to better protect our data, and we did all of that in less than 30 minutes. Thanks for joining me today. If you'd like to learn more about database security features, I recommend you visit Oracle Live Labs, where you can get hands-on experience with the things we talked about today and a whole lot more. I'd also like to recommend you join our monthly database security office hours. We hold these on the second Wednesday of each month. You can subscribe to them at bit.ly/AskTomDBSec. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope to see you someday soon in another session.